cell phones. We didn't have any modern tools that got in the way of getting the work done. If you were in a conversation with Walt, like Marty points out, you just remember it because you know that he's remembering it. So there was this ongoing continuity all the time. And I noticed a lot of people caught on to the fact that Walt remembered almost everything he ever heard. Because sometimes somebody would say something, and then a month later they'd say something else, and then Walt would look and he says, well, that's not what you told me last time. So this was sort of a warning thing that said, you better pay attention, because you keep your story straight. Well, guess what? This means your creative antenna's up, and you learn, don't ever lie. Don't ever make up a story, because he's going to catch you later at this thing. So you got to understand, it was like the fact that it's almost like management by walking around, and he would, as much as he could, get out of his office and walk around that back lot all the time, talk to people. He didn't really set an agenda for anything. He just would wander in. Everybody got used to that's the fact of the way it went. But it did something extra. You lost this formality between what somebody would say, the boss Walt Disney and everybody who's working there. Everybody sort of became one. And I noticed that a little bit later on when Walt would deal with corporate presidents and chairmen of the board of very large corporations when we were attempting to sell Epcot, that a lot of people would reproach Walt as Walt Disney, the amazing God. And when they get too close, I even saw the chairman of the board of Westinghouse, his lower lip started to quiver when he got too close to Walt. And this was amazing to watch, and then Walt would loosen his tie and make himself look a little bit ratty so that you could actually talk to the guy. The brilliance was, how do you get people to work with you when you are at that kind of beloved stature? He almost had to work at not being Walt Disney so that he could be the team working with everybody, and people would pick that up right away. I think even people that came into the company kind of knew, they kind of picked up that vibrations after a while, and you would never really be nervous in Walt's presence. And then the other little subtle thing he did, which, how many of you saw the Mr. Banks clip yesterday? All right, here's a test. As Ms. Travers walked into Walt's office, and the secretary indicated that Walt would be out momentarily and she'd have to wait. Just at the moment of that scene, did you hear anything?
Cough.
Do it again, do it again. The cough. Yep. That was his very polite warning that he's coming down the hall. And I thought, that movie picked that part up perfectly. Because he would come down the hall, and you got your door open, and you know, you might be not in the position you want to be in there, and there'd be this little.
That was one of your problems, wasn't it?
But that was so polite, and it was a very subtle thing, and I got the impression he did that deliberately, knowing that he'd be close enough to give you a little warning that he's about ready to pop in your door. So you had always had that 5-second warning, and that movie picked that thing up so quickly yesterday. So that was a sample of the way it was with Walt.
Bob was.
I have to add one thing to that. When they moved the Bambi group into the new studio, they were the first ones to be there, and they were upstairs near Walt's office, and they were all, you know, working on Bambi, and Walt would always come in and see what was going on, and sometimes he wouldn't. And you'd start hearing this voice, Mark said, man is in the forest, man is in the forest, man is in the forest. And it was Walt coming down the hall. So they'd all be in proper order when he arrived.
That was the password, man is in the forest.
Thomas Center. And we were sitting there about to order a drink, and who should walk up at Walt Disney, but I didn't know it. He came up from behind me. And he saw this hand go over Mark's shoulder, and he said, is this your new bride? And I looked up and it was Walt Disney, and I almost swallowed the glass. He said, what type of work do you do? And I said, well, I was in the garment industry, and I was making brassieres and girdles, and I know all about elastic. I said, I now control the American woman by elastic. So he sat down and he was fascinated. He knew nothing about elastic, and he wanted to know everything. And I think for about a half an hour, he was asking me questions about elastic. I finally bought him a drink. So anyway, he was all excited about knowing about elastic, and he was going to go tell other people about elastic. And he was always thinking about elastic when he looked at me, I think. So anyway, he started to walk away. He said goodbye, he started to walk away, and then he turned around and he said, you're going to work for me someday. And 2.5 years later, I got a phone call from his secretary. And she said, Walt wants to know if you do the costumes for Small World. And I said, so I was told to be there at 9 o'clock the next morning, and I was there at 8. And I got the job, and I've never been happier in my life than that job.
Yeah, we're happy you got the job. Bob, you were...
I had one tiny bit more.
I couldn't stop you.
I was born during the Depression, and I didn't have a doll like all the other little girls. They had Shirley Temple dolls and Didi dolls and all these, and I was lucky to have a roof over my head and some clothes. So anyway, my friends wouldn't let me hold their dolls or anything. They were, it's mine. So I made a rag doll for myself finally, and that was my doll. So I was always sorry that I didn't have the dolls, but when I lined up all those dolls and I got to do all of the costumes, I thought, I've got more dolls than that.
The first time I've had something really in common with Alice, because my friends wouldn't let me hold their dolls. Bob, you were intent on being a car designer, I believe, when you first met Walt.
Hello, everyone. As you know, Walt had us working on Saturdays, starting in 1954. He would pay us for 5 days, but expected us to work for 6. You can't do that today, but that's how we got the work done, as extra days. There on a second week of October 1954, I had started to make some sketches for an Utopia car, and they walked me out to the back lot. There was a little chassis of a car, 4 wheels, no body, so I kind of knew what they wanted. And as you know, when guys stand around and talk about cars, there's a tire, so you walk up and you put your foot on the tire, and then you put your elbow down on the, like that. And there was a spare wheel left out of 3 out of the 4. And this guy walks up, unshaven, looked a little on the ratty side. I remember he had a Roy Rogers belt with a little painted silver bullets in it, and a funny little short tie with a funny little symbol on it. And he was just talking away. And then he walked off, and as he walked off, everybody said, "Okay, see you, Walt." And I thought, oh my God, that's Walt Disney. Saturday morning, unshaven. I thought he was the father of one of the night guards. So I never met him. It was common in those days. He just worked with everybody, and nothing more was said.
That was it.
That was it.
All right, we'll get more from you later. X, you were a farm boy from Colorado, as I remember, right?
That's right. The 2 of us came from Colorado. One of them came from Rockeford toward Mellon country, and I was in the coal mine district. And we were two kids from Colorado, and it was quite an exciting career start. I started as the usual in-betweener in the animation department, and I never dreamed I'd ever even get to know Walt. But I went one day in the elevator, and I said, "Good morning, Walt, how are you?" He said, "Hey, X, you're just doing great." And I said, "My God, he knows my name." And then I almost fell on my hands and knees. The great man knows my name. And then the career went on. Then a few more years before the Army took me. And, excuse me. But I was lucky enough to start all over again after Uncle Sam got through with me.
We'll get into some of that later, where we can transfer you from animation to engineering. So we'll get into some of those stories. So I think, do you have a personal favorite? Well, I should say where I started. First time I met Walt Disney, I was hired to put out a tabloid newspaper at Disney. I was about to be the editor of the Daily Bruin at UCLA. And thank you. All the Trojan fans, leave now, please. And I started in mid-June 1955, a month before Disneyland opened. And 2 weeks after I went to work, I had to present the concept for this newspaper, which was going to be sold on Main Street at Disneyland for 10 cents. I had to present it to the Walt Disney. And I was 21 years old, had never worked professionally, and had just finished my junior year at UCLA. And believe me, I was scared as hell. I mean, here was Walt Disney, and I was making a presentation to him. And I always tell people that was the turning point in my career, because if Walt didn't like what I was doing, I was out the door before I ever got started. But fortunately, he liked it, and that led to the next half century, basically, after I finished my last year at UCLA. But the thing is, I couldn't figure out how he had time for this little thing I was doing. I mean, figure it out. 10 cents this newspaper was going to sell for on Main Street. It took me a long time, and I finally realized what it was. And that was that for Walt, Main Street was a real place. And every town, 1890, 1900, had at least one newspaper. So for Walt, it was part of the story, and a missing tooth, if you will, from the story if it didn't have that newspaper. What is it that we all remember and try to do when we're creating things for the parks? It's that detail, story detail. And it's so in-depth, and he taught us that and emphasized that. And I think that's why the parks are what they are. So, I'm going to go to Bob this time. Do you have a personal favorite project that Walt assigned you to do? What was it, and why was it your favorite?
Yeah, that's like asking me 250 projects, over 100 of them were for Disney, and it's like you want me to pick my best grandchild.
Yes, that's what I asked you.
No, because really, all the things that Walt had us doing, every one of them was an absolutely fantastic project, whether it was a small one or a big one. But I think the one that tickled him pink the most was the fact that he actually